Hey everybody, so thanks for joining us for today's brown bag session on the TPS Teachers Network. My name is Kyle Clabaugh. I'm the project coordinator for the TPS Western Region. And joining us today is Keith Patterson, our associate director for the TPS Western Region, as well as the coordinator of the TPS Teachers Network, Mary Johnson, who's going to share some amazing resources with you here in a sec. But we wanted to highlight some of the new and current primary source albums created in the TPS Teachers Network this past year. These albums are like primary source sets, and they offer some really great teaching ideas, some purposeful primary sources from the Library of Congress and other places, and are all created by teachers, librarians, and other educators just like you. So we're going to show you these specific primary source albums because they not only offer resources to use in your classroom right now, but also because they provide some interesting insight into how educators across the nation are approaching their own teaching of prominent cultural day events like the pandemic, civil rights protests, and elections, for example. So first, I think what we'll do is just show you a quick overview of the homepage. And Mary, if you want to go ahead and share your screen. So
Sure,
if you haven't been in if you haven't been in the TPS Teachers Network before, you can go to tpsteachersnetwork.org/register to set up an account, and it's completely free. This link is also in the session description for this brown bag session as well. So feel free to sign up and engage with other educators across the nation. But this is what the homepage looked like. It's basically like a social media kind of network where you'll see a feed of the most recent posts in the network that includes posts from all around the public group. So because it's a group set up social media, each group is defined by like a content area or a type of pedagogical strategy or a grade level, for example. But you can join each of these groups and really get a sense of what other educators are talking about in civil rights, for example, or in inquiry. But you'll kind of see how this is set up. And on the right side, you'll also notice a menu that includes some of the trending module or the trending topics of the month, as well as the latest insider post, the calendar of TPS events that always has some really nice events throughout the that are nationwide. So it's all the TPS consortium events there, the Library of Congress Engage page, and also just other members so that you can connect with people that are like-minded. And then, at the bottom there, you also see the groups, all the different kind of groups that you can add, as well as the Teaching with Library of Congress blog. That's always an amazing place to go for teaching ideas. So I'm going to hand this off to Mary Johnson, and she curates this monthly newsletter. And I want to just say real quick that this monthly newsletter, at the top of the homepage, you'll notice a little question mark. So that's our help center, and the help center is a great place to just kind of get started if you're not sure kind of where to go or what to do. But specifically for this, in the help center, there's a link on the left side for the newsletter archive, and Mary does a phenomenal job curating all of the amazing discussions and albums and links and other things that have gone on in the network each month. So be sure to check those out. There's just a wealth of information and teaching ideas and resources. So be sure to check out those. So without further ado, Mary Johnson.
So Kyle said that I curate it, but he's the one who puts it together. So kudos to Kyle too. When the pandemic first struck and we had one-day warning, sometimes less, to leave our classrooms, we created a group really quickly called Teaching Online with Primary Sources. I wanted to show you that group. It has continued to be one of our more active groups. You'll find a lot of ideas for teaching with primary sources here. And as in all groups, you'll notice that across the top here, there are different icons. For example, in discussions, You can find all the discussions that are going on in albums. You can find the albums that have been created in this group. An example of a discussion, which I think would be of great interest to many of you, is from one of our mentors. He did an inquiry using a stereograph, and he described his classroom in California and how he handled this stereograph online, completely online, and he was quite surprised that it worked so well. So that's an example of a discussion with teaching ideas. And then also there are many albums. I specifically wanted to point out a big project that TPS at Metro State and the Western region did. They worked with a number of teachers to come up with some learning modifications for no, low, and high access to technology. I think that Peggy mentioned this in her introduction on Monday. And this is an album with full lesson plans to be used with ideas for if your children have no access to technology, if your high schoolers have some access, if your middle schoolers have a lot of access. It all depends on your situation. So this is an album of lesson plans that with all of those modifications that I really wanted to point out. And again, that we put into the Teaching Online with Primary Sources group, and to find it, you would go to albums. And then, a lot of the work that's been happening over the last year, it doesn't necessarily all land here if it has to do with teaching online with primary sources. Here's an example in the TPS Tech Talk group. And that is a fairly recent post done in February. And it was using GarageBand with children's books. So again, this is a lot like what happens across the network. People will make albums or start discussions or share links, but they also talk about how they use these ideas in their classrooms. This is a short album, but it has an actual example of a GarageBand music MP3 that a student created for this teacher. And it accompanied a children's book, well-known children's book written in 1912 called The Rocket Book, a real creative approach to teaching online. We have a lot of pandemic related sources too in the network, and those kind of go across the network. You can simply do a drop-down search here in the search box, and you'll see that if you watch, you'll see when I type in simply pandemic, that's a keyword search, and you can see there are all sorts of resources in the network having to do with the pandemic. Some are links, some are in albums, some are full lesson plans. One of them that I found from that drop down is this one. And this is in a group we call Partnering with Museum Educators and Archivists. And it's about schooling in a pandemic. It's a discussion, but I wanted to point out how very often the real richness of the TPS Teachers Network comes in additional comments. So if you look at this additional comment, this person, Cheryl Davis, who's a mentor in the network, she led our users to articles and then posted some images of students in history who were learning outside of the school environment during pandemics in open air schools. So this isn't an album, it's a discussion, but look at how rich the additions are in this, because the users of the network contribute through their comments as well. It doesn't all just end with a single post. I wanted to point out too that, of course, as you know, we've had a lot going on in elections, and we have an election central group that's been very, very active, obviously, through the last bit of time. And again, discussions, albums, videos, files, and links are the main types of content that we have throughout the network. So in this election group, here's an example of an album, The Great American Political Poster, with ideas for teaching and lots of resources in this album. We have discussions in this same Election Central group. Here's one on American political dynasties and the future of a political party. And it goes on. There are many, many other kinds of discussions. I have to move my screen down a little bit so I can see my tabs. Here's another. Sometimes comments lead to items in the Library of Congress as well. As you can see here, this came in as a link. Somebody uploaded this link to the inaugurations set, the primary source set at the Library of Congress from the teachers page. And again, it's not just you having to come up with your own ideas. Very often, if you follow what goes on in the network, you'll find ideas and you won't have to invent everything from scratch. Moving on, we also, in the last year, as Kyle mentioned, had a lot of anti-racist demonstrations and a lot going on in the nation. And you'll find a lot of racism-related resources in the network, both in the civil rights group, obviously, but also in the TPS Commons. A lot of people post in the Commons because they're not sure where to put materials that they find. We have a lot of people in the network who are brand new to the network, who come in through workshops, pre-service teacher classes, and they create albums as well in the network. Here's one from a brand new member of the network, just posted, first attempt at doing an album. And this album is about LGBTQ rights. Good start, just 3 items, but also you'll see this link is a collection of resources on the Stonewall riots. So you don't have to just bring in Library of Congress resources. Again, you'll see that there are materials being added in the comments as well to help out this, this new user add to her album. Here's another one on the Greensboro sit-in. This is one that I did in the civil rights group. I wanted to demo one thing about the albums here that I really want you to know, because it's something you can apply directly to your classroom. If you belong to a group and you find an album that you like, if you scroll to the bottom of that album, I'm scrolling down, look for this share button. And then look below that for the copy shareable URL. This is a very special feature that not many people know about. If you copy that link, you'll see that it copies to a clipboard. And then I'm going to real quickly open a new window and copy it in. That creates an album from the network that strips out your name, so it honors your privacy. And it is the same album, but in a public-facing format. And you can see that we have drop-down icons where you can read more, or you can see more about the teaching notes in each of these cases. If you want to show this to a classroom, you can use the plus button, the plus icon, to display a primary source bigger for your classroom. So the entire album is here. And you just go through those. You can see it brings in the bibliographic content. This one has a plus sign, so you can display that big in your classroom or in any other situation you're in. So great for teaching. All right, moving on. I wanted to mention that a lot of people post in the TPS Commons when they're not sure where to post, and they are maybe not aware of a lot of groups, and that's perfectly all right. This is a racism-related topic that was posted in the TPS Commons, and this is fairly typical of some of the really high-level users of our network, that they go to the work and the trouble and the time of compiling lists of resources. So whenever you have a chance to look at these really complete collections, what this person has done, she's a mentor in the network. She's looked for all sorts of materials within the network already there in multiple groups, and she's put them into a list and credited what's found in the network. So I wanted to show you this because very often we think we have to invent everything from scratch, and we don't. If you do a search in the network on difficult topics, you would find us, And look at the work that saves you. Just amazing what our mentors put together for our users. Then finally, I just wanted to mention that there are all sorts of other groups in the network. I think that it's really useful to join groups of special interest to you. Here, for example, is the Primary Sources in Elementary Education group. Pretty active group. Here's within this a fun lesson on the 500-year history of pockets. Another example, the Arts and Primary Sources group, a very active group in the network. And an example from this group is another album, How Music is a Voice for Change, with a lesson plan and an actual discussion of how that is used in classrooms. Sort of related to another music one that we had. Sometimes our users view this network as a place to really write something that they want to write that really interests them, and it gives them almost like a publishing format. If you consider this everybody's blog, here's an example of a user in the arts group who wrote about revisiting historical photography with new lenses and looked at this portrait in a very different way after she did some more research into it. So it's a good place if you like to write, consider writing. I view this as kind of a blog post, to tell you the truth, even though it's an ordinary discussion in the network. And some groups might surprise you. This one, Disability History, is a fabulous group from a TPS Consortium member in Massachusetts. And you heard from him. If you are listening to this recording on Friday during the brown bag session, I hope that you heard Rich Karen talk during the Wednesday night presentation about disability history and the kinds of things you'll find here. I have to move this over. I've lost my tabs. Here's an example. An elementary civics lesson. What is our value? And it's a look at undervalued people. A complete lesson, an elementary level lesson for Black History Month, with everything linked within this article to help you out. And I think there are many, many other groups of interest. There's an ELL group, a STEM group, primary sources in the school library, my personal favorite. Yay, librarians, and primary sources in the English language arts classroom. There's a teaching with film group. There are so many groups in the network. Just go exploring and find groups of interest to you. You won't get blasted with notifications. You'll just have a richer experience in the network if you join a lot of groups. I'm going to turn it back now to Keith and Kyle.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. It's just the TPS Teachers Network is such a great way to connect with the rest of the TPS consortium, their projects, as well as the other 10,000 plus educators that we have nationwide on the network, all having, discussions and pedagogical ideas and things that they're throwing out there to the rest of the community. So it's really fun. It's like a rabbit hole, like being on the Library of Congress search page. You get into this rabbit hole of looking at different classroom ideas and resources that people are using in their own classrooms. And it's such a fun way to connect with the rest of the community. So, that's kind of our presentation, and we're happy to help answer questions and help out getting registered or whatever. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or anything. And please join us and the other 10,000 plus members in the TPS Teachers Network by registering using the link in the session description.